Please, sir. For those who do not hear the gentleman, he wonders about how it is that I became certified to profess the law. Where did I study? Now, as you all know, that until this year of 1779, there has never been a law school anywhere in America. The first one here, in this year, the College of William and Mary. Now, there are certainly law academies in Great Britain, notably the Inns of Court. But very few Americans, certainly not mine, have the means to send their sons thither for such an extended period of time to pursue their legal educations. There certainly were some exceptions, and some men in this city. You might remember the Randolph brothers both received their legal educations at the Inns of Court. Middle Temple, Robert Carter another, Benjamin Waller another. But in most young men's cases, Jefferson's for example, the commonest manner for a young man aspiring to become a lawyer is to read law with an established attorney, a mentor, commonly for 4 to 5 years, all the while using the mentor's library, attending court with him, observing, talking about matters. And it's an apprenticeship of sorts. One might serve as a clerk, making copies, running errands about the city, and then after commonly 4 or 5 years, when both gentlemen believe that he's ready to stand as an attorney in his own right, he undertakes his examinations. In order to become a lawyer in Virginia, one must have 2 signatures upon his law certificate, those signatures being applied by a rather select group of examiners, commonly the lawyers who were certified in the general court. They're in the Capitol building. It's the Supreme Court in Virginia, and the only which can hand down a sentence of death. Well, I didn't follow that approach either. Frankly, my father had intended for my brother and I to become first shopkeepers and then later merchants. For those of us who have any measure at all of Scot blood in our veins, have a natural affinity to that particular occupation. I wasn't very fond of it, perhaps not so well suited. 2 different attempts at a country store, both of them in Hanover, both failed. And not, as my detractors would have you believe, because I'm more given to invective than to inventory. These were difficult years throughout Virginia. You may recall 3 years of consecutive drought. Tobacco failed miserably, tobacco being our money, why a great many enterprises were not successful. If anything, my brother and I were simply guilty of being overly generous and extending credit towards our neighbors, who otherwise must have starved. But to further compound my miseries, my farm, which hadn't really been very productive in the first place, burned, and almost all of my possessions with it. So, just to have some shelter above my family's heads, for I was rather newly married then and 2 small children, in exchange for a private room at my father-in-law's tavern, Hanover Tavern, I began to work in his employ, managing the premises in his absence, keeping bar, playing a fiddle, that was required. Now, Hanover Tavern sits just opposite the road from Hanover Courthouse, and so in this way I became acquainted with a number of the lawyers who were riding the county circuit. That is to say, by day they would argue law in the courthouse, and by night they would argue law in the tavern. And after a time I began to think that I too might be well suited to this particular occupation, for my mother still claims that I have a gift from God for argument. So I borrowed as many law books as I could lay my hands upon. It was 3. Read them in 6 weeks' time when I made that fateful journey here to Williamsburg to stand for my examinations. I acquired the 2 signatures, both Mr. George Wythe and Mr. John Randolph, and became an attorney back in 1760. And, well, at the risk again of appearing somewhat boastful, most honest men in this city will tell you I'm not only the best attorney in all of Williamsburg, but in all of America. I rarely lose a legal cause. So now that I'm no longer your governor, I can resume the profession of law. If any of you have any legal advice that you're seeking, I'll be pleased to meet with you after.